Ah, my dear ones, they say the deepest wound comes from the hand you trust the most. When my neighbor Grace handed me that money that day, I thought it was the kindest gesture anyone had shown me since my late William passed away. Little did I know, it was the beginning of a sly plan, one that would strip me of my home, my shelter, and every memory I held dear.
When my hard-working husband, my late William, closed his eyes to this life, it felt as if I had not only lost my life partner, but also the very pillar of our home. For I learned painfully and by the bank's letter left on my doorstep how deep the debts he had taken on to keep the house standing really were. It turned out William had been burning himself out, all to spare me, to keep me from worrying, and I had no idea. The remaining debt, with interest, had snowballed into a mountain far beyond what my meager widow's pension could cover. I didn't want to beg my children or saddle them with my struggles. While I tried to manage on my own, my neighbor of 40 years, Grace, one evening turned up on my doorstep carrying a plate. She said, "Mrs. Helen, I'm heartbroken to hear what's happened. You're William's legacy to me. Take this money, close the bank's mouth, and pay me back when you can." In that moment, I felt like the whole world had opened up for me. Oh, my trusting heart, who could have known then that Grace wasn't doing me a favor? She was using my helplessness to set a trap, to slip the hook into the last keepsake my husband had left me, this house. When I paid the bank down to the last penny and freed myself from that repossession notice, I felt reborn. I was so grateful to Grace that I vowed to myself I would never forget her kindness for as long as I lived. In the first week after the debt was cleared, Grace began coming around every day with a pot of food, saying, "Don't be alone, Mrs. Helen. Don't be lonely." At first, her visits were like medicine to me, but over time, it was not the food she brought that gnawed at me so much as the way her eyes darted about my home like a little creature picking at it. At first, I passed off remarks like, "Those walls could do with a fresh coat of paint," or "William's old armchair takes up so much room. If you got rid of it, the place would feel airier," as innocent suggestions to make the house nicer. But she wasn't pointing out my home's charms. She was searching for weak spots. Not even a month after I took the money, one day while she sipped her coffee, she said, "Mrs. Helen, I see you never used the back garden. Such a shame for the soil. Give it to me. I'll plant tomatoes and peppers and share with you, and we'll chip away at that debt together. What do you say?" At that moment, I felt as if scalding water had been poured down my spine, because there wasn't any rush with the money. I could pay when I could. Sitting at that kitchen table, I realized that the sum Grace had given me was not a friendly hand at all, but a hook cast into the house my late husband had left me, this house. I was left speechless by what I heard, my dears, because that line about "we'll deduct it from the debt" felt like an ice-cold dagger driven into my grateful heart. I didn't know what to say. I only nodded as if to say, "Very well," for the weight of owing Grace at that moment had taken away my will to resist. The next morning, before dawn, I found Grace in my garden with a spade and shovel in her hands, treating my late William's beloved roses and that lovely vine which he had tended like the apple of his eye, as if they were her own, uprooting them in a frenzy. To me, that garden was not merely soil. It was the place where memories with my husband had grown into a home. I crouched by the window and watched, my heart bleeding, but I could not make a sound. After all, the woman was paying off my debt and improving the garden, and I was so crushed beneath that counterfeit kindness that I had to stand by and watch my own garden be pillaged in my own house. She didn't stop at tending the plot. She sat on the garden bench outside my door until evening, shouting at passers-by as if she were the rightful owner, barking orders with an air of entitlement. She'd even weigh the few tomatoes she'd gathered and say, "Look, Mrs. Helen, we've knocked this much off your debt today," keeping a running tally like a shopkeeper. The final straw came last weekend when she brought her own barbecue and a large outdoor seating set into the best corner of the garden. With that smug look she read from my silence, she announced, "Next week the whole lot of us will be here, children and all. Don't worry, we won't disturb you." And in that moment, she brazenly seized another piece of my home. When the weekend came and Grace's whole family poured into the garden with the racket and commotion of people arriving at their father's vineyard, I was left watching them like a stranger through my own window. The smoke of the barbecue, the laughter, the shouting children, they turned the peaceful garden where William and I quietly sipped our coffee into something like a fairground. When she barged into my kitchen under the excuse, "Let me make the salad inside so you don't have to trouble yourself, Mrs. Helen," I bitterly realized that the boundary of that garden had been crossed. She was no longer only taking my soil, she was reaching into my private life, into the hearth where I had shared 30 years of bread with William without permission. As she turned back toward her guests, her eye caught on the small spare room I rarely opened after William died, the room full of old keepsakes, and she said, "Oh, Mrs. Helen, this room is just sitting empty. Isn't it a shame?" Hearing that sent my heart into my mouth, because for the first time, I saw the greed and the hunger plainly in her gaze. Before I knew what had happened, she was saying, "My little boy is preparing for university entrance exams and can't study with his siblings' noise at home. You already use this room like a store cupboard. Give it to me. Let me tidy it up and put a desk in. He'll come and study in peace, and we can count it as rent. It'll come off your debt quickly." My knees gave way at that moment, and my mind went numb. After the garden, now they were laying claim to a room inside my house. That phrase, "we'll deduct it from the debt," had become a lock on my lips and a chain that imprisoned me in my own home. And Grace, taking advantage of my silence, was gradually seizing my house piece by piece.
Before I could even say, "Wait, Mrs. Grace, that room is full of my late husband's keepsakes. Don't," Grace had already rolled up her sleeves and begun. "We'll pull those 2 chests into the hall, and the sewing machine will fit in the entryway," she said, and began shuffling my past, my memories, from place to place. I couldn't even get a single no out before her boldness froze my blood. The next day, her son, Martin, showed up with a backpack. He didn't even look me in the face as he came in. That curt hello of his was the kind of attitude that said this wasn't my house at all. And he slammed the door to the spare room so hard the photograph of William on the wall shook. That room became a closed box to me. Strange music coming from it in the middle of the night woke me, and every morning I winced at the state of the bathroom. Grace brushed it off with, "Martin's a bit untidy, forgive him," and in that way
way, she found a pretext to come and go in my home and my kitchen without keys or permission. My peace at home was completely gone. The quiet house I once knew had turned into a place where unfamiliar young people came and went, where the bathroom was constantly occupied, and where an account was kept of the food cooked in my kitchen. That boy treated my home almost like a student boarding house, and Grace kept trying to make me swallow it by calling it debt repayment. Then I realized, my child, it wasn't just my garden or a single room I'd lost. I'd lost all say in my own home. Grace's poisonous money had not put a claim on the deed so much as on my will. Using my helplessness, she turned me into a servant in my own house, a hanger-on. Martin, the supposed student who needs to study, no longer fit in his room. He sprawled out on the sofa in my living room in the middle of the night, watching those loud television shows as if he owned the place and I were the intruder. Meanwhile, my sleep was stolen away. One morning, I gathered my courage to tell Grace, "My dear, I can't sleep at night because of Martin's noise. Could you ask him to be quieter?" And she cut me off mid-sentence. "Oh, Mrs. Helen, he's young and he's helping you repay your debt. Look how nice that rent money is for you. Just put up with it a little." A few days after that dressing down, Grace sidled up to me with a teacup and asked, "Mrs. Helen, my house is a bit untidy these days. You know, we're having a family gathering. Your living room is so empty anyway. What if we held this week's get-together here?" I felt as if I had been struck dumb because that living room was my private sanctuary, the last refuge where William and I sat and breathed our memories. Now Grace had set her sights on my most intimate place, the heart of my home, and demanded it as payment for the debt. Before I could even protest, "Grace, that can't be. That's practically my bedroom." She put words in my mouth and said, "Perfect. We'll sit one afternoon. That'll count for a good chunk off your debt, and you'll have peace. Me too." And just like that, she added my living room as another notch in that blasted ledger of hers.
Ah, my dear, that morning of the gathering, Grace was at my door before even the roosters had begun to crow. With the ease of someone rearranging her own living room, she was dragging about the armchairs where my late William and I had shared so many holiday morning coffees. "This cabinet is such an eyesore. Best move it out," she muttered to herself as if she owned the place. When her guests began arriving one by one, it was Grace who opened the door and ushered them in with, "Come in, darlings," while I stood by my kitchen doorway, watching helplessly as my own living room filled with laughter from women I'd never met, like some stranger hiding in her own home. There she sat, right in my best chair, saying, "I'm just helping poor Mrs. Helen. She's been so lonely and the place was getting quite neglected. I thought I'd lend a hand," turning my misery into a tale of her own goodness. And she had the nerve to call out toward the kitchen, "Helen, dear, those pastries are getting cold. Bring them out, will you?" As if I were her servant. One of her guests admired the porcelain plate on the wall, a keepsake from my late mother, and I heard Grace lean toward another woman and say, "Oh, those old things. When I get the house, I'll toss all this junk and redo the place properly, nice and modern." At that moment, it wasn't the porcelain plate that cracked, it was my heart. That woman had her eyes not just on my home, but on my past, my memories, the last traces of William. In my eyes, she was no longer a neighbor, but a vulture waiting for me to die. When that noisy flock of women finally left, the dirty plates, the muddy footprints across my carpet, and that heavy cloud of cheap perfume hanging in the air felt like stains on the dignity of my home. I stood in the middle of the mess,
crushed under the weight of Grace's poisonous words. After the last guest was gone, Grace wiped the fake smile off her face and stood before me with that cursed ledger in her hand. Gone was the syrupy, "Dear Mrs. Helen." In its place was the cold stare of a merchant come to collect a debt. She said, "Mrs. Helen, it's clear you'll never be able to pay me back. Not with garden rent, not with Martin's room. The house is falling apart anyway, costs a fortune to maintain." The words slapped me like a blow. Before I could even process what she meant, she added, "Let's not drag this out. Transfer the house to me and I'll clear the debt entirely. I'll even fix it up for you." She spoke as casually as if she were buying a crate of tomatoes at the market, not taking the home I'd lived in for 30 years. And when she shamelessly said, "We're not throwing you out, of course. You can have that small room where Martin's staying. Live there as long as you like. You'll have no expenses." The air left my lungs. In that instant, when she offered me a corner of my own home as charity, I realized I had nothing left to breathe for.
My dear, the moment I heard her say, "We'll give you that little room," every trace of gratitude and helplessness I'd ever felt toward Grace turned to ice-cold fury. To be treated like a guest, no, a burden in my own home, in the house my husband had left me, shattered the silent woman I had been for so long. I don't even remember how my voice rose after years of being quiet. I shouted, "Do you even hear yourself, Mrs. Grace? This is my home, my William's legacy to me. How dare you ask me to hand it over and then act as if giving me a corner of it is some sort of kindness? Even a stray dog wouldn't sleep there." At my outburst, the mask of the gentle neighbor she'd worn for so long fell away. A harsh, cruel expression I'd never seen before twisted her face. "You're the one who doesn't know what you're saying, Mrs. Helen," she snapped. "It was fine when you took my money to save your house, but now that it's time to pay me back, suddenly it's a problem?" Before I could even shout, "I want nothing from you, not your money, not your pity. Get out." She turned at the door and gave a bitter laugh. "And how will you pay me back? With that pitiful widow's pension of yours?" she said. "I'll give you 1 week. Either transfer the deed to me properly, or my lawyer will see to it that this house is taken from under you." She slammed the door so hard that William's photograph on the wall trembled. And in that instant, I understood. I hadn't accepted help from a neighbor. I had walked straight into a monster's trap. That piece of paper I'd signed when I took her money wasn't a loan. It was my death sentence. Ah, my dear. After she left, I don't know how long I sat there in that terrible silence, or when daylight faded into night. It felt as if roots had grown from my feet into the floor, while her icy words, "Either hand over the deed, or I'll take the house," echoed through my mind, draining the life from me. My eyes fell on William's smiling photograph on the wall, but instead of finding strength, I heard a whisper in my mind. "Your husband is gone. The pillar of your home is gone. You're all alone now, Helen." That feeling of loneliness, that abandonment, pressed on my shoulders heavier than any repossession notice ever could. I reached for the telephone, lifting the receiver again and again, wanting to call my son in London, my daughter in Bristol, to say, "My dears, come quickly, they're taking our home." But each time the thought of facing them like this, a foolish, deceived old woman, pinned me to my chair. That night, I didn't sleep a moment. Curled up on that armchair, I relived the day Grace first handed me that cursed money, her false kindness, her lies about deducting from the debt. I realized with horror that she had likely laid this plan the very day William was buried, waiting patiently for the moment I'd be weakest, most alone. When that 1-week grace period began, I still didn't know what to do. I had no money for a lawyer, no strength left to fight. And while her son Martin's still lounging comfortably in one of my rooms, this house, the home I had once called my refuge, now felt like a prison camp, one whose keys I had handed to my enemy with my own trembling hands.
The first 2 days of that 1-week deadline felt like 2 centuries, my dear. I no longer knew what sleep was at night. And during the day, every time someone knocked on the door, my heart leapt to my throat. I was sure it was the lawyers coming to throw me out. I turned into a fugitive, hiding in corners of my own home. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, Grace's so-called university-bound son, Martin, burst out of his room shouting into his phone, "Don't do anything, I'm coming right now," and rushed out of the house. The panic in his voice, the way he ran, nothing about him looked like the diligent student I had believed him to be. He left in such a hurry that for the first time in months he forgot to lock his door. Inside me, fear said, "Leave it be," but another voice, desperate to know what sort of schemes this woman was running inside my home, dragged my feet to the threshold. When I pushed the door open, trembling, the sight froze my blood. There wasn't a single textbook or notebook in that room, only piles of horse racing sheets, torn betting slips, and a computer so expensive I couldn't have bought it with 3 months of my pension. And right then, standing in that messy room, it hit me like a thunderclap. Grace's story about her son studying for university was a lie, a massive lie. She had planted that boy in my house like a spy so she could take it over from the inside. I had realized it far too late. As I stood among the reek of cigarettes and gambling, staring at the betting papers, I finally saw the cruel mockery behind her help. The rage that rose in me at that moment burned away every last trace of fear or gratitude I'd ever felt. Just as I turned to leave, the computer screen lit up. I can barely read, but even I could tell those weren't study notes. It was a long list of names, each followed by amounts far greater than the sum I had borrowed, and red marks beside them that read things like late interest and collateral. When I looked closely at the list, I saw names I knew. Other widowed, lonely women from our street. Aunt Amin, old Mrs. Fletcher. That's when I realized in horror that I wasn't her only victim. Grace had spun a web around the whole neighborhood like a spider, catching every helpless soul she could. My fear deepened. My eyes fell on a half-open drawer beneath the desk. I reached out with trembling hands and pulled it open, and what I saw inside crushed the last bit of hope I had left. Bundles of cash, title deeds to other people's homes, and stacks of blank papers already signed. And there, among them, was the very sheet I had foolishly signed, thinking I was just borrowing money. That's when I knew. Grace wasn't a neighbor at all. She was a ruthless loan shark, a predator who preyed on the old and the desperate, and her son Martin was right in the middle of her filthy trade.
my dear, when I saw those bundles of title deeds and the blank papers, the ones signed in the despair of those poor people, I realized with horror that Grace wasn't merely trying to insinuate herself into my hearth. She had wrapped the whole neighborhood in a cancerous web. The documents in my hands were not evidence of a loan shark's filthy profit alone, but proof of ruined homes, the curses of grieving mothers, lives torn apart. Before the shock of those deeds and the money could even leave me, I heard the front doors creak and the heavy footsteps of Martin. I felt my blood turn to ice. I shoved the evidence back into the drawer as fast as I could, thinking only of what would happen if they found me with it. I didn't even want to imagine the consequences. Took one step toward the kitchen to slip away, but the hallway light came on and I heard Martin calling, "Mom, are you in?" as he walked straight for his room. I can't remember how I threw myself into the dark gap behind the coats, William's old overcoats, but I did, and I hid there like some small animal. When Martin entered the room, my heart nearly burst from my chest. I lay still among those coats, holding my breath. The first thing he did was open that drawer and check what was inside. Then I heard him on the phone. "Hi, Mom. I sorted it, but don't stall on that Helen woman. The week's almost up. Get the deed now. We need that house." Hearing that made my knees go weak. As Martin moved toward the kitchen to get a glass of water, I slipped out like a mouse and ran to my bedroom. I slammed and barred the door behind me. In that instant, I knew I wasn't just an old woman who couldn't pay her debts. I was a dangerous witness who knew too much about this ruthless gang, and this house could become my grave. As I drew the old bolt across my bedroom door, leaning my back against the cold wood and listening to Martin's careless footsteps outside, the words I'd heard on the phone, "Get Helen's deed," hit me like a slap. This was no ordinary debt. It was a life or death business. All night I turned and tossed on William's settee, replaying in a loop how Grace had offered me that money under a false kindness, how she'd crept into my life under the guise of helping with the garden, then moved in under the lie that her son was studying. I realized clear as day that she and her rogue son had made a profession of ensnaring old lonely people like me and moving into their three-penny homes. As that week drew near its end, I also understood that telling the police my neighbor is a loan shark, they're taking my home, would do me no good. Grace would cry crocodile tears and shout, "She's lying, she's trying to avoid paying me," and everyone would call me a liar. I needed the deeds from Martin's drawer, the list on that computer, the proof of their dirty business. But with that thug Martin patrolling the house like a guard and Grace able to knock at any time, I could not risk going back into his room. If they caught me snooping and realized I knew all their secrets, they would make me disappear quietly in my own home, send me to William sooner than my time. I was certain of it. It finally dawned on me that crying and pleading would get me nowhere. To escape these monsters, I would have to be smarter and craftier than them.
William used to say, "Helen, the greatest trap is the one your enemy never imagines." So there, behind my bolted door and with nothing but my fear and my wits, I began to make a dangerous plan, a plan to strike Grace with her own weapon.
Ah, my dear, I spent the whole night behind that locked door, sitting on William's settee and thinking, how can I get that scoundrel out of my house? I realized I couldn't force things. I would have to wait, lying in ambush for the moment Martin left the house to go off to his gambling dens and racetracks. At the first light of morning, I pressed my ear to the door, listening. I could hear Martin yawning in his room and padding to the kitchen for a snack. I could not swallow a single bite nor close an eye. Every nerve in me was focused on waiting for the moment that worthless young man would finally leave. Just before noon, the chance I'd been waiting for came. Martin's phone rang again and he stormed off, shouting into it, "Don't do anything! I'm on my way!" He snatched his coat and slammed the front door. That slam was not a threat to me, but the signal of my salvation, the cue to put my plan in motion. Once I was sure he'd gone, I slipped out from my locked room, though I knew the real danger was Grace possibly turning up at any minute. I peered through the lounge curtain at her house across the way, and seeing she wasn't home, likely shopping at the market as usual, I let out a long breath. Now, my child, the moment had arrived. Her rogue son was away, and the loan shark mother was nowhere to be seen. I had only seconds to get into Martin's messy room, switch on the computer, and find the title deeds in that drawer so I could save my home. Fear of being caught stabbed at me, but love for William's memory steeled my hand, and I turned the handle. Oh, my dear, when I entered Martin's room, I felt like a thief in my own home. The shame of moving on tiptoe across my own floor almost overwhelmed me. Yet that shame was nothing compared to my resolve to save the house and our memories. I went straight to the drawer under that cluttered desk where they kept their dirty secrets. With trembling hands, I opened it, and there, the bundles of cash, the deeds taken from other poor people, and the cursed loan document with my signature lay like a coiled snake. I grabbed my own house deed, and most importantly, the signed papers that listed the other victims, proof of their loan sharking, and, as if my hand had burned, stuffed them into my nightgown and close to my chest. Those papers were the iron chains of my oppression. They were my ticket to freedom. Just as I was about to leave, the computer screen, still on, caught my eye. Martin had not even bothered to close the file with the names and interest calculations. The list of victims lay there in plain view. Then I remembered William's voice telling me how to find the police number on that old mobile he'd shown me, the clumsy little phone whose keys I had always found hard to press. With shaking fingers, I took it out, and while I photographed the computer screen, the names, the debts, the late fees, I felt in my bones that this image would be the end of Grace.
my dear, I spent the whole night behind that locked door, sitting on William's settee thinking, how will I get that rogue out of my house? I realized I could not force the matter. I would have to wait, lying in ambush for the moment Martin left to go off to his gambling dens and racetracks. At first light, I pressed my ear to the door because I could hear Martin yawning in his room and padding to the kitchen for a snack. I could neither swallow nor sleep. Every fiber of me was fixed on waiting for that worthless young man to leave the house. By midday, the chance I'd been waiting for came. Martin's phone rang in a fury, and shouting into it, "Don't do anything, I'm on my way," he snatched his coat and hurried out the front door. The slam of the door was not a threat to me, but the signal of my salvation, the cue to set my plan in motion. Once I was sure he'd gone, I slipped out of my locked room, though I knew the real danger was Grace possibly turning up at any moment. I peered through the lounge curtains at her house across the street, and seeing she wasn't home, likely off to market as usual, I let out a long breath. Now, my child, the time had come. Her rogue son was away, and the loan shark mother was nowhere to be seen. I had only seconds to get into Martin's messy room, switch on the computer, and find the deeds in that drawer so I could save my home. Fear of being caught gnawed at me, but the memory of William steeled my hand, and I turned the handle. Oh, my dear, when I stepped into Martin's room, I felt like a thief in my own house. The shame of tiptoeing across my own floor almost overwhelmed me. Yet that shame was nothing compared to my determination to save the house, our memories, and our dignity. I went straight to the drawer under that cluttered desk where they hid their dirty secrets. With trembling hands, I opened it, and there, the bundles of cash, the deeds taken from other poor folk, and the damned loan document with my signature lay like a coiled snake. I snatched my own house deed and, most importantly, the signed papers that listed the other victims, proof of their loan sharking, and as if my hand had been burned, shoved them into my nightdress and pressed them to my chest. Those scraps of paper were the chains of my captivity. They were my ticket to freedom. Just as I was about to leave, the computer screen, still on, caught my eye. Martin hadn't even bothered to close the file with the list of names and interest calculations. The victims' names lay there in plain view. I remembered the old mobile William had taught me to use, the awkward little phone whose buttons I always found hard to press. With shaking fingers, I took it out and photographed the computer screen, the names, the debts, the late fees. I felt in my bones that this picture would be the end of Grace. When I saw image saved on that tiny screen, it felt as if the world's weight had lifted from my shoulders. I was no longer speechless against her. In my hands, I held both the deeds and clear proof that this cruel woman had been preying on innocent people. But just as I slid the papers into my dress for safety, I heard the front door's lock creak and Martin's heavy footsteps. My phone nearly slipped from my hand. My blood ran cold. He'd come back, and I was about to be caught red-handed. There was no time to run to my room and bolt the door. As his footsteps echoed in the hall, I saw the unmade bed in the corner, and ignoring the ache in my 70-year-old bones, flung myself under it without thinking. Hidden in that filthy darkness, with my hand over my mouth, I held my breath. Martin stormed into the room, muttering, "Where did I put that damned money?" and went straight to the drawer I'd rifled. He tore it open and rummaged through its contents. My heart almost stopped. Fortunately, he was only looking for cash to pay off a gambling debt and didn't notice the absence of the deeds and signed papers I'd taken. After a few grumbles, I'll get it from my mom," he stormed out and slammed the front door. And I lay under that bed trembling, with equal parts shock at having escaped and the power the evidence in my dress now gave me. After he left and the noise faded into the street, I waited under that bed until I was sure I was alone. Then, aching all over, I crawled out of my hiding place and first touched the treasure in my dress, the precious papers that would be Grace's end. I knew then that one more second in that house would mean death. Grace or her rotten son could return at any time, and the moment they noticed the missing documents, I would be in mortal danger. This was no longer my home, but a trap set to be my grave. I slipped into my bedroom and made no bundle, took no quilt, for I was not fleeing. I was going to seek justice. From the bedside table, I took William's smiling framed photo and my worn purse with a few coins and gave my 30-year home one last look. Silently as a thief, I stepped out into the street. I was not going to burden my children with this problem, nor sit in a corner and weep. I would not wait for the week she'd granted to expire. The time for revolution had come. It was my turn to set the wheels of justice in motion. Turning the street corner, my dress stuffed with the photographed list of names and the stolen deeds, I walked not with tears, but with determination towards the police station at the end of the road, to knock on the state's door and make that cruel woman and her rogue son pay for what they had done.
Ah, my child, when I stepped through the doors of the police station, my heart was still pounding in my throat, but my feet would not turn back. This place was the last fortress where people like me could tell their troubles and hope for justice. I did not come to sob and wail. I came to make that snake called Grace and her rogue son answer for what they had done. The young inspector at the desk looked at my dusty, disheveled self with surprise and asked, "Come in, madam, what's the problem?" A huge lump rose in my throat when I began, "My neighbor Grace is trying to throw me out of my home. She lent me money and now she's taking over my house." I could see a tired, another neighbor row expression form on his face. Before the inspector could brush me off and tell me to take it to court, I laid out the filthy fortune I had tucked into my dress, the title deeds from other people's homes, and the signed blank documents I had taken from Grace's drawer, and spread them across the desk. "These are the papers of other victims she tricked," I said. "This woman is a loan shark." The inspector's bored look vanished, and a hard official seriousness took its place. To deliver the real blow, I fumbled out my old mobile and showed him the photograph I had taken of Martin's computer screen, the list with all the victims' names and the interest calculations. "This is her filthy ledger, proof of how she's ruined the whole neighborhood," I said. The inspector leapt from his chair and ran to his superior's office. Within minutes, the station was alive with activity, radio traffic, officers moving. A young constable handed me a glass of water and said, "Don't worry, Auntie. What you've told us is serious. We'll root out this gang. Just tell us when she's due to come by." For the first time in months, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I was no longer alone, and the day Grace had set as her deadline would be the day she faced her reckoning. After I gave a full account at the station and produced the evidence, the officers told me, "Mrs. Helen, go back home and act as if nothing has happened. Wait for her like you planned." My heart clenched again. Grace's 1-week deadline had reached its end, and I was to go back into the lion's den in the hope that justice would be ready. When I returned,
Plainclothes officers were hidden in William's room and in the kitchen. I sat on the sofa in the living room, prayer beads in my hand, and waited for the moment that wretched woman would knock. At last, in the afternoon, the doorbell sounded. Grace came in wearing that vile, triumphant smile of someone who thought she'd won the house. "Well, Mrs. Helen, the time's up. Have you prepared the deed, or shall I call my solicitor?" she asked. I fixed my eyes on her greedy face and said, "No, Grace, I didn't prepare the deed, but I did prepare your filthy ledger and the deeds you stole." At that instant, the plainclothes officers who had been hiding in the kitchen and William's room sprang out and shouted, "Don't move! Police!" Grace, who a moment before had been smiling as if taking my home were a victory, froze as if struck dumb at the sight of the state. Before she could cry, "What's happening? This is slander!" the deeds belonging to the other victims and the photograph from my phone were laid on the table. Outside, teams had seized Martin red-handed while he attempted another fraud. I sat on my sofa and watched quietly as the woman who had tried to swallow my house was handcuffed and led out of my home like a criminal. That day I learned with terrible clarity that the greatest evils often hide beneath the brightest masks of kindness. My home, my husband's memory were returned to me. Grace and her gang, alongside the curses of the people they'd ruined, were taken behind iron bars. And the bitter lesson left with me was simple. Even when you're powerless, never give up the pursuit of justice.